Thanks for joining us today. I'm Dee Dee Laugesen, Executive Secretary for the Committee on the Present Danger China. We appreciate your interest in our weekly webinars, in which we expose and analyze the Chinese Communist Party's unrestricted warfare against America and the free world, and the help being provided to the CCP in waging that warfare by captured U.S. elites. We encourage you to visit presentdangerchina.org for information on new programs, access to videos of our past webinars, and tons of other very valuable content. For updates and news, subscribe to our Substack at presentdangerchina.substack.com and follow us on X at CPD China. Our moderator today is Frank Gaffney. Frank is the president for the Institute for the American Future, vice chair for the Committee on the Present Danger China, and host of Securing America on Real America's Voice Network.
Welcome, everyone, to this edition of our weekly Committee on the Present Danger China webinar on a most important topic. This one has to do with the unrestricted warfare the Chinese Communist Party has been waging on America's campuses for years. The extent to which that has taken place and the myriad manifestations of it is something that has been neglected for too long, whether it is what the students themselves are up to, some at the moment 277,000 of them, whether it's what professors or others on campus are doing in the way of recruitment by the so-called 1,000 Talents program of Communist China, whether it's the activities of Confucius Institutes, or in the case of those that have been shut down, others that have been renamed but are doing essentially the same kind of influence operations and possible recruitment and even espionage on college campuses. These and many other facets of the Chinese activities are now, thankfully, being given the kind of scrutiny that is long overdue by the Trump administration. We will be talking about, among other things, the throwdown the administration has had with Harvard University, among other reasons given for cutting off the university's ability to sponsor foreign students, being that it has, quote, coordinated with the Chinese Communist Party on its campus, unquote. In addition, we've been reporting from the Stanford Review about Chinese intelligence operations on that campus. And the reality, as a marvelous panel of experts will attest momentarily, there are assuredly hundreds, if not thousands, of other universities in this country that have been similarly weaponized against us. And not least the professors in many of those universities who may or may not have direct ties to the Chinese Communist Party, but certainly are aligned with its cultural Marxist efforts to take down not just academia here, or its products in terms of the students that in many cases move on to leadership positions in our country, but the country itself, which is actually in the crosshairs of the Chinese Communist Party. So to examine in detail what is going on in our universities and colleges, and for that matter, other parts of our educational system, to take stock of the implications of these being put in the service of our mortal enemy, the CCP, and to examine what kinds of things can be done above and beyond what the administration has begun doing, federal judges notwithstanding, to try to right the ship. We are very proud to present to you today's program with some of the best of our team, starting with one who is no stranger to these programs, a member of our Committee on the Present Danger China. Dr. Karen Siegemund is her name. She is the president of the very highly acclaimed American Freedom Alliance in Los Angeles. She has been a teacher at various levels of educational grades. She has been as well during the Cold War a top consultant on anti-submarine warfare to the United States Navy. Extraordinary resume that brings, I think, the appropriate balance of national security mindedness and deep knowledge of what is going on that does not exhibit it very much in America's academy. So we're going to kick off with Dr. Siegemund, and we've asked her to provide us with a kind of overview of what is going on with education and national security in the United States of America. Dr. Siegemund, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Frank. Such an important topic, and it's a real honor to be part of this lineup. There's no question about it that education is a national security issue, and therefore our educational institutions are key fronts in the war that's been declared and waged against us by the CCP. Taking a step back, it's been a universal truth that the best way to weaken a society from within or without is by influencing, indoctrinating, controlling the children, and the most efficient way to do that is through our educational institutions. Education is a key load-bearing wall of a flourishing society and draws the greatest energy to subvert it. Some quotes on the topic. Lenin had said, "Give me 4 years to teach the children, and the seeds I have sown will never be uprooted." Hitler said, "He alone who owns the youth gains the future." Mao had said, "The schools must become instruments for the revolution," and Stalin, "Education is a weapon whose effect depends on who holds it in his hands and at whom it is aimed." Tyrants know that the most effective means of societal control is through the children, which means through the schools. Most recently, UNESCO, that arm of the UN that deals with education, is overtly using education as a means for advancing all of the UN sustainability goals. As we know, the CCP has declared a people's war on the US, and they've been engaged in, as Frank said, unrestricted warfare. That is, tactics up to and including kinetic hot war. Their preference, of course, is to take us down without a shot being fired. And again, the easiest, most cost-effective way is through our educational institutions, and we have incredibly been prey to this tactic for decades. Give me 4 years, said Lenin. Own the youth to gain the future, said Hitler. Education is a weapon, said Stalin, and each of those is being played out right here, right now. And Mao's utilizing the schools as instruments for the revolution is absolutely happening. And while he didn't say it in the context of taking us down, nevertheless, the schools are the instrument of this revolution. And the CCP is playing a major role in exactly this. Today, we're talking about the CCP's campus crusade, how they're utilizing academia to weaken us, to make us vulnerable, and to strengthen themselves. But as is very clear, the Chinese Communist Party is completely allied with our communists here at home. Call them the woke, the left, whatever. They're all aligned in their hatred of what we are and what we represent, and in their passion to take us down. What are some of these tactics? Well, first, since the family is a bulwark against totalitarianism, the CCP and their allies seek to weaken the family and increase schools' roles in the day-to-day life of children, to act increasingly in the place of the family in all areas, including being the arbiter of morality. Secondly, since religion is also a bulwark against totalitarianism, the CCP and their allies here have been virulent secularists. But of course, they only seek to remove the Judeo-Christian God and Bible from schools, that foundation on which society and our prosperity are predicated. The dominant religion in our schools is wokeism, or put differently, communism, itself a religion which brooks no obstacles to its reach. Curriculum is, of course, a means of propagandizing, but schools engage in a more general diminishment of that which makes us great. Independent thought, innovation, honest inquiry, actual science, reading, learning from the greats, self-reliance, determination, aspirational thinking, self-agency, all of this is quashed, thereby undermining the ideals of what makes America great and the ethos which empower us. DEI, of course, is a tremendous weapon in this regard, and its attendant death of meritocracy. In addition, our current schools teach complete moral inversion. Communism is good, the United States is bad. To undermine children's belief in the goodness of their country is to damage their own self-worth, but it also undermines any pride and desire to fight for this country. And at the same time, the evils of communism are whitewashed when mentioned at all, and China is praised, never criticized. Another quote from Lenin, "We must teach the children to hate our enemies." And of course, that's exactly what they're doing, with the enemy being the United States of America. Fortunately, President Trump is taking aim at various of these tentacles of the CCP, including their influence in our schools. All of his education-related executive orders address much of this. In addition, he's limiting money coming in from China and elsewhere, and instead of defaulting to the prior let them all in policy, is taking a very strong, clear, and common sense America First position of letting nobody in unless they pass certain criteria aimed to keep America and Americans safe. Secretary of State Rubio just announced 2 days ago, under President Trump's leadership, the U.S. State Department will work with the Department of Homeland Security to aggressively revoke visas for Chinese students, including those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party, which is, of course, practically all, if not all, of the approximately 280-some thousand Chinese students who are here. This is, again, further evidence of education as a national security issue. The Trump administration has already moved to deport a number of foreign students and is revoking thousands of visas. The courts, of course, are doing all possible to block these, but there was a huge win just this morning. Education here in America is meant to be an inoculant against tyranny, not its delivery system. And it appears that we have in the White House at the moment a president and an administration fully cognizant of this. In closing, China has been working on undermining the U.S. by indoctrinating children of all ages and undermining and exploiting our educational institutions, but President Donald Trump is working assiduously to both dismantle their means of destruction as well as to build pride in the greatness of America. That the left fights him at every turn is, of course, no surprise, but is nevertheless disappointing. Education, again, is a national security issue. It can be used to weaken a people and a nation, but can also be used to shore it up, to build a common sense of purpose, a national sense of unity and pride. It can be used to advance those principles which gave birth to this nation in the first place, those principles and values that contributed to our becoming the world's sole superpower, as well as the greatest force for good on the planet, or it can be used to tear down those accomplishments and ensure that we never achieve such greatness again. Andrew Sullivan had said years ago, "We all live on campus now, a reflection of the power and influence of what happens on our universities and the dangers of losing them to anti-American ideals. To not capitulate, we must regain our hold on our educational institutions, treat them as the front that China does, and fight for America first in the classroom." Thank you, and I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of the panelists on this vital topic.
Thank you very much, Dr. Siegemund. I meant to mention that I had the privilege of being on a program that Karen organized and moderated in Los Angeles earlier this week, and had as a companion on the program Daniel Greenfield. Should be a doctor.
Yeah.
If I can give him an honorary degree, I will. He and I were, as it happens, yesterday on another program together, organized by Larry Reagan of the Middle East Forum. And one of the other participants in that program is relevant to this topic, was Sam Westrup of the Middle East Forum, who presented information about Georgetown University as another of these institutions, prominent institutions, that has been deeply penetrated by, in this case, it appears the Muslim Brotherhood and other Sharia supremacists. As it happens, I'm headed today to my 50th anniversary reunion at Georgetown, and we'll be seeking to talk to as many people as I can about that particular problem. So this webinar is of more than a professional interest. It's very personal to me as well. So we're going to hear next from a man who has specialized in exposing these sorts of enemies within in every institution of our country, as well as in the far reaches of the planet that aid and abet those enemies inside our wire, as they say. His name is Trevor Loudon. I would confer on him an honorary doctorate as well for the great work that he has done over many years on documenting in the most rigorous manner imaginable the various forces at work that we are confronting, whether they're of the left, the communist Chinese specifically, or from the green, if you will, red-green axis, the Sharia supremacists, both of the Sunni and the Shiite stripes. I know of no one who has done a more rigorous job of exposing these forces internal to the country. He hails from New Zealand. He saw what can happen to a country when such forces take over, and he has been warning with great effect through myriad books on films, including The Enemy Within, The Enemy Within the Church, Security Risk Senators, House Un-Americans, countless essays and interviews, including one that he did with me earlier this morning on our show, Securing America. It's always a privilege to have Trevor Loudon with us, and he's offered to give us a sense of something that Karen touched on, but get into a little bit more detail, how this kind of penetration and subversion of the academy in the United States is starting out at the preschool level, not just at the university, and will share with us insights as to what this might mean for the American future. Over to you, my friend Trevor.
Well, thanks very much, Frank. I think that our friend G. Van Fleet will tell you that the Chinese communists are very thorough and they don't ignore the children. The Chinese Cultural Revolution was driven by the children. They were indoctrinated heavily. Now, I want to draw everybody's attention to an organization based out of Chicago called the Erickson Institute. It was named after Erik Erikson, a psychologist, friend of Sigmund Freud, I believe, and the guy who coined the phrase identity crisis. He was also kicked out of Stanford, Berkeley for not taking, for failing a loyalty oath in the 40s, and taught at the California Labor School, the Communist Party school in Northern California. So this institute is named after him. It was founded by Irving Harris, a philanthropist whose wife Bernie's vice board was in the Chicago Young Communist League with Quentin Young, who later became Barack Obama's personal physician and the inspirer of Obamacare. On the board, this organization was set up in 1966 with the aim of training early childhood educators to form a nationwide corps of early childhood specialists who would then disseminate their ideas through educational institutes across the country. And it's been very, very successful. But in 2017, the Erickson Institute, it was also founded by Barbara Taylor Bowman, who came from a Communist Party family in Chicago and is the mother of someone you've all heard of, Valerie Jarrett. And Obama gave Barbara Taylor Bowman an award for her work back in 2009. But in 2017, the Erickson Institute signed a formal partnership deal with the China Children's Press and Publications Group, which publishes the official magazine of the young pioneers of China, the Chinese Communist Party's kiddies wing, essentially. It publishes books on the thoughts of Xi Jinping. It publishes books for the Young Communist League. It publishes books on Chinese Marxism and its superiority to Russian communism and the American system. It is a major source of propaganda right throughout China, and it has a partnership with the leading early childhood development teaching institution in America, which has influence all over the place. There have been multiple exchanges between the two groups. People from Chicago go to China to train. People from China come here. So this is an organization to indoctrinate American early child, kids, kindergarten, early elementary school kids. So this is a Chinese operation, set up by the communists, now in partnership with the Chinese Communist Party, influencing children all over the country. Now, incidentally, one of the board members of the Erickson Institute was Bernardine Dawn, who you've all heard of, the weather underground terrorist, the Maoist, close friend of Obama's, who has done something. So we talk about curriculum, but the other damage the communists have done to the education system is totally destroying discipline. Now, Bernardine Dawn was the director of the Children and Family Justice Center, where they promote issues of war and peace, race and juvenile justice, children in conflict with the law, family violence, and school law. This is the institute that has done more to destroy discipline in our schools with lawsuits, with programs, etc., working with unions to basically turn American schools into bedlam. We all know that American schools have nowhere near the discipline they had 20 or 30 years ago, and it doesn't matter how good your curriculum is if you can't discipline the kids. If the kids won't learn, you're wasting your time. So that is another subversive element in the school system coming from a pro-Chinese communist. I'll give a couple of other examples on the early childhood education. Dwayne Campbell out of Sacramento is a member of Democratic Socialists of America, a 50-year veteran, a former member of the United Farm Workers under Cesar Chavez, but he is part of a group that writes the history textbooks for California. This guy also works with the Maoists of the Bay Area, and the Bay Area is where the Chinese communists, through Stanford University, through Sacramento, through San Francisco, really got a foothold in this country. And that's Dwayne Campbell. But he is basically in charge of writing the California textbooks, history textbooks, where they're all about Cesar Chavez, and they're all about labor unions and LGBTQ struggles, etc. And as he says himself, the good thing about this is that California is the biggest textbook market in the country, and books written for California end up all over the country. So this is another avenue of Chinese infiltration into our education system across the nation. Another example of this is Kent Wong. Now, he's a former member of the Communist Workers' Party, a very, very strong pro-China communist, who has worked over the last several years to form a partnership between the California education unions and the Chinese education unions. There's actually a formal partnership with interchanges, trips back and forward, delegations back and forward, so that Californians can learn more about the Chinese education system, and supposedly Chinese can learn more about the California system, though I doubt they'd be very interested personally. So we got to understand that unions are as Marx said, unions are the transmission belt of communism to the masses. So the education unions, which are all controlled by the left, by the hard left, the pro-Chinese left in this country, are the main channels for the corrupt curriculums and the weakening of discipline in American schools. And these connections are very, very easy to find. They are open, working right out in the open. They don't make any secrets of their delegations, but nobody calls them on this. Karen mentioned DEI before. Well, diversity, equity, and inclusion and its partner, white privilege, comes from Noel Ignatieff and Ted Allen, two former members of the Communist Party of America Provisional Organizing Committee, a pro-Chinese breakaway from the Communist Party USA. They invented these concepts. These concepts were then introduced into our education system, into our business world, through the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, a pro-Chinese Communist Party famous for starting Black Lives Matter and running the riots of 2020, and famous for its deep connections to the Chinese consulate in San Francisco. So everywhere you look in the American education system, high school, elementary school level, the lack of discipline, the horrible curriculums can all be traced back to the communist movement and specifically to communist China. And these links are not hard to find. Which brings us to the universities. A lot of people, commentators, make the point, well, you know, we've got 280,000 Chinese students here. There might be some spies amongst them. Well, I would venture to say that every Chinese student allowed in this country is allowed here because their family is in good graces with the CCP. And is legally required from Chinese citizens to cooperate with the military when required. That's everybody in China, whether you're in business, academia. If the military wants you for something, you are legally required to comply. Are you telling me that every Chinese student that works at MIT on laser technologies or robotics, or works at Berkeley or Lawrence Livermore or anywhere else in the United States is not debriefed by the Chinese Communist Party before coming here and on return, and probably while they're here as well? It beggars belief to think that they would even allow anybody from China to come here to these. And they're not coming here to learn sociology. They're not coming here. They're all in the STEM sciences. They're all doing hard technology, all military application stuff. So look, every Chinese student in this country must be regarded as a potential spy. And President Trump's very, very within his rights to cut that pipeline. It's long overdue. And if that makes Harvard go broke, well, I think you could take half of Harvard's buildings and turn them into trade schools so the children of Massachusetts could learn something useful and the American economy would get a boost. In fact, I think about half the universities in America would benefit to be turned into trade schools. And I think the whole economy would benefit, as would the students in those schools. So, but, you know, the Confucius Institutes are all part of this. And they have been closed down in some states, but they just come back under other names. So the Chinese, we've got to understand everything China does is done at the direction of the state. I quote in my book on Kamala Harris, Stealth, Kamala Harris's Communist Roots, a Chinese academic saying that when we put we want businesses and organizations in every congressional district in America. We all worry about the people, Chinese buying land near military bases. No, he said the purpose is we want institutions in every congressional district, because then we can get control of those districts, the politics of those districts. Because if you put a battery plant in rural Michigan that employs 2,000 people, that local congressman is never going to criticize China again, ever, because too many of his constituents depend on China for their income. So academically, business-wise, everything is done at the direction of the state. So their goal is, through the Confucius Institutes, the early childhood stuff, is to twist the minds of our kids, teach them bad history, teach them bad science, weaken their academic ability so they're more manipulable, and steal our secrets, steal our technology, influence our politicians, corrupt our academics, bribe our politicians. But other than that, it's all good. It's all benevolent, you know. But this is what we got to face. As Karen says, this is a national security issue, but it's way, way, way wider than a few Confucius institutes. Way, way wider. It goes from, as I say, it goes from diaper to gown, diaper to graduation cap. The Chinese are in every single facet of our education, right from 3 years old to 25 years old.
Trevor, what an incredible tour de force. Your content, as well as the documentation of it, is unsurpassed, and we so appreciate your contributing to, especially an understanding of the diaper to gown character of this problem. Thank you. We're going to be focusing next on the experiences and challenges of a man who has been valiantly fighting inside the academy for, well, freedom, for one thing, and for the values that we all hold dear. Well, I should say, we've certainly involved at the Committee on the Present Danger China, and I know our audience holds dear, and that is the need to preserve the national security in the face of myriad threats to it from enemies, foreign and domestic. As an Army officer in military intelligence, Dr. Stanley Ridgely took an oath to defend our Constitution against those various threats. And he has been working assiduously, I think, among other things, in his role as a professor of management at the business school at Drexel University, and in his various publications to advance the cause of freedom in the face of such threats. I have gotten to know him and can attest to his personal courage in doing so, including in the face of very dangerous protests on his campus and the neighboring Penn campus, anti-Israel and so on. And he would walk through the crowd wearing a yarmulke, even though he's not Jewish, just to demonstrate his solidarity with the people they were demanding be destroyed in many cases. Stan Ridgely is the author of two recent and particularly relevant books. One is entitled Brutal Minds, about the left's brainwashing of our university students. The other, just published, is DEI Exposed, in which he talks about the saving of the United States, really, from the various challenges that have been thrown its way by these cultural Marxists that Trevor has just described so well. And we're anxious to get his thoughts on a, well, sort of situation report, as the military would call it, from the front lines of the fight against the radicalization on America's campuses. Professor Ridgely, thank you so much for joining us. Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Frank. It's great to be here with a distinguished panel and talking about this important issue that I think all of us have, taken our own cuts at it. I bring a perspective, particular perspective, in that I've been studying this issue of DEI. I've been studying the issue of this doctrinal communism that is infesting our universities, and I've written two books on the issue. Now, whereas I think Trevor's comments that virtually every Chinese student is going to be an agent, more or less, of the communist government is no doubt true. I'm going to focus on the doctrines that have been embraced by our own academics here that really do manage to infest our universities with Maoism. Now that's kind of an extreme statement, but let me be clear on this. Right? In my book, Brutal Minds, I talk about how education schools, which are the chief villains in this, there's really no other, no greater group of mediocre academics than you'll find on a college campus than what is, aggregated in the education schools. And it's for this reason that the standards are low. It attracts a group of people who are enamored with Marxist ideas, but they can't use the M word in education schools on the college campuses today. They cannot use the M word, either Marx or Mao. So they've managed to launder their ideas through a Marxist functionary by the name of Paulo Freire, who is revered in college education schools as part of a pantheon of great thinkers. Paulo Freire was a Marxist. He admired Lenin, he admired Stalin, and he reserved most of his admiration for Mao Zedong. He said that whereas Lenin shot down the peasants and Stalin shot down the peasants, Mao found, quote, the most congenial solution of the century with regard to educating people in the doctrine of communism, and that is the Cultural Revolution. He wrote this in 1974 at the height of the Cultural Revolution in an article called in Cross Currents called Conscientização, or Critical Consciousness. Now, most people who follow Freire, these educationists coming out of our education schools, going down into K through 12, and also going up to teach in our graduate schools of education, many of them aren't even aware that this is part of Freire's doctrine. Most of Freire's education doctrine and theory was cribbed from Mao Zedong's education theory. I mean, this is a fact. If you read his books, he has a whole series of books called The Pedagogy of Hope, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, Critical Consciousness. It is all Maoism kind of recycled. Well, this is what American educators have embraced, and they've done so explicitly. There are no dots that we need to connect. I mean, it's pretty much out there in our face, but it's done in such a manner that, well, no one knows it's Marxism. Really, no one knows it's Maoism. It's critical consciousness, and it's Freirean consciousness. He's a Brazilian educator with a kindly visage and a gray beard, and so he must be okay. Well, this is how the doctrine of Maoism has been slipped into the K through 12 via these service teachers, and it's also been maintained and reproduced in the college campuses in our graduate schools of education, mainly in graduate programs that train student affairs people, higher education management, leadership, that kind of thing. Now, these people are trained to be functionaries in the university. I mean, this is how the bureaucracy recycles itself. And so you'll find that the main Marxists, the main leftists on campuses are in the bureaucracies. And these, and the bureaucracy is called student affairs, and they're laboring for social justice. And their job, as they see it, is to, quote, boldly transform higher education. That's their motto. That's the motto of several of the student organizations, student affairs organizations, professional organizations that really are the keepers of the flame, the keepers of the ideology, and ensure that that is what is propagated on the college campuses, including mine. Now, what is included in this? Well, it's indoctrination. It's indoctrination of a received truth. The idea that we want to have our students achieve critical consciousness. Critical consciousness is the modern permutation, neologism of class consciousness. It's kind of Marx class consciousness updated for the 21st century. Critical consciousness. And this means accepting whole cloth, accepting in one bite an ideology that divides our students, our faculty, our staff into villains and victims. And this is the view of folks in student affairs. It's certainly the view of the DEI cadres that are highly paid, ubiquitous on the college campuses, but thanks to the DOJ and the current Trump administration, are on their way out. Some going quietly, many are making a lot of noise, but they're on their way out, unfortunately. The bureaucracy that remains is canted to the left tremendously. We know this. It's canted 12-1 liberal to conservative. The faculty 6-1. This is according to this research by my colleague Samuel Abrams at Sarah Lawrence College. 6-1 in the faculty, but 12-1 in the bureaucracy. And this is why this 12-1 ratio of committed believers in the leftist enterprise of social justice, this is why its reform is so difficult, and why we find DEI programs are being swept away, but suddenly they're being reincarnated, same programs, but just different names. I think that Trevor mentioned the Confucius Institutes. We've swept away about 100 of them since 2019, but they're popping up under different names, supposedly teaching, the rich texture of Chinese culture and language, et cetera, et cetera. But we know that they are basically making the American students, faculty, and staff susceptible to these types of Maoist/communist ideas. And I've taught in China. I taught it for 4 years, intensive business courses at a university in Guangzhou. And I can attest that, these university students there speak English, and they can speak capitalist lingo better than a lot of our students here. But every university has what might be called a Zampolit, or a political officer that guarantees the political reliability. There's no talking politics. When I was there, whenever the Communist Party Congress, which is held every 5 years, was in session, suddenly the internet connection for the university was all wiped out. So there could be no concerts, there could be no exchanges of information, no flash mobs, no protests, nothing like that. And they were not even trying to put up a front. No, they said we're cutting off the internet so that our Congress can go on unmolested. So there is a definite difference between the education environment in the United States and certainly in communist China. And this idea that we should have an open door to 250,000 Chinese students studying STEM topics, whenever we know that the Chinese Communist Party has a hand in debriefing these folks when they leave and debriefing them when they come back, that this is somehow attached to academic freedom and free speech. I saw an article this morning in Inside Higher Education. A spokesman by the name of Jonathan Friedman at PEN America, which is concerned with human rights, said, this is terrible what the Trump administration is doing, examining these visa applications for these Chinese students. It's terrible. Hand-wringing. The ubiquitous hand-wringing, we see the obligatory hand-wringing. Well, as a matter of fact, this is not academic freedom. It's not freedom of speech. It is a matter of national security. Who comes into the country and who doesn't? As I was saying to Frank earlier, China is not Switzerland, and Russia is not Belgium. So we have to make distinctions between these countries and not pretend that there's some sort of world community that is benign and come one, come all, and we can increase our world comity by somehow, hands across the water, and let anyone who wants to come here to study and take military applicable secrets back to their home country, that would be a policy that's someone like President Biden would follow. No, we have a new sheriff in town, and there's a new spirit of scrutiny that is ongoing. And the American universities with the Fulbright scholarships and Harvard University and Yale University and University of Pennsylvania, that they're not used to scrutiny, and they're not used to accountability, not used to transparency. But as I said, there's a new sheriff in town, and I think that these universities are going to have to get used to it. I'm delighted by it. I'm optimistic about where the direction's going, and I can't wait for 3.5 more years of progress on the college campuses. I think that we've got a lot of work to do. I mentioned that the view of some of these organizations, one of the organizations in particular, the student affairs organizations, this nationwide professional group, their motto is boldly transforming higher education. Well, this organization is steeped in the propaganda and steeped in the ideology of Paulo Freire and neo-Marxism. I'm a member of the organization, so I know this for a fact. I get their literature, and which appears in my book. Where did this come from, this idea of transformative education? Well, They believe in indoctrinating students, and they used to use something called re-education. In fact, they adopted re-education from Kurt Lewin, an American social psychologist from MIT in the 40s, the father of the Encounter Group, who developed a brainwashing program. And student affairs on college campuses nationwide utilize his technique. But they realize that re-education is a problem. This term is a problem now because of the Manchurian Candidate film and things like that. So they basically changed it to something that's still used today. They call it transformative education. Coincidentally, the Communist Chinese, which also used the term re-education, began using something they call education for transformation. Now, this is more than just a coincidence that we use the term, our people here use the term transformative education, whereas the Communist Chinese are using the term education for transformation that they apply to their own concentration camps where they are maintaining over 1 million Uyghurs, the Muslim minority in China right now. So we see a parallel notion of communist education or re-education. The great insight that Mao offered his own people and his own political party, I should say, was that we can rehabilitate our ideological enemies by putting pressure on them, utilizing, as Dinesh D'Souza said in an interview with me, he says that utilizing these educational power tools and applying them onto to recalcitrant populations. And they do that to their own people. They did it wholeheartedly in the Cultural Revolution. And we find our own people here in the United States usually utilizing because we have those pesky human rights, they can't utilize the full-fledged indoctrination program. So they use kind of a Mao light education indoctrination program here on the campus. So they're using it virtually everywhere. And I can tell you by looking at any university's website within 30 minutes, I can tell you who the people are doing it, and I can tell you who the people are doing it to. I can give you the names of the programs, and it's really not difficult to find if you know what to look for. How do you find out what to look for? Well, I've done that for you. Either of my books, Brutal Minds or DEI Exposed. Am I hustling my books? Well, yeah, because I'm a big believer in telling the truth. And Frank has lauded me, and I don't think I deserve any kind of special accolades or any type of courage. I'm just a truth teller. And I believe that if you're committed to the truth on a college campus, that you have to speak that truth, irrespective of what people are going to say about you, irrespective of what they say. And I think that there's a war right now on the college campuses, barbarism versus civilization. And I think that this has been made manifest over the last 18 months. And for that, only that, I am grateful. And I want to count myself on the side of civilization. And I hope that we have more people standing up for that on the college campus in the months and years to come.
Bless you. Thank you very much for an extraordinarily impressive description of the problem from the front lines. I love Dinesh D'Souza's term, power tools of education. That really captures it, as well as does your observation that what we're looking at is barbarism versus civilization. Some would simply reduce it to good versus evil. I think there's a fair dose of that as well. We're going to hear from another truth teller now. A man I've not had the privilege of meeting previously, but I've heard wonderful things about. His name is Dan Carell. He is an attorney by training, but has served in senior positions inside the United States government, including as the Deputy Undersecretary in the Department of Education and as a senior advisor there. He's also been a former executive director of the Corporate Executive Board, and his title is something that he's taken previous cuts at, but we've asked him to share with us its insights. The CCP on U.S. campuses, the findings of the House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party. Dan is joining us by video, and we're very grateful for him doing so. I think it's in the form of a PowerPoint presentation, basically, but it is conveyed by video. Let's go to it now.
Hi, I'm Dan Carell with the National Security Institute, and pleased to be talking to you about the CCP and American and other Western universities. I am going to try and land this plane in 7 minutes so that it's interesting and fast. So I want to talk about four things. I'll start by setting the table, and then I want to talk about CCP goals. And then beyond that, there were two things that came up in the State Department statement this week. One was students with CCP connections, and the other was students working on or researchers working on critical technologies. And I've got some conjecture about those. Let's start with setting the table, though. Number one, some people have expressed skepticism about whether the CCP is really doing anything in American universities. Of course they are. It would be malpractice for them not to. They have tens of thousands of people in agencies, from the Ministry of State Security to the United Front Work Department to other organs of the Chinese state, whose job it is to, in a host of different ways, look out for what they regard as their interests. They're not sitting there so that they can play Tetris. They are there to get things done. They are actively working a host of angles, media and journalism in the Chinese diaspora, like all kinds of things. They've got over 300,000 students in the United States alone. I think they have around 1 million students in China total that are studying abroad, or graduate researchers abroad overall. It's an asset. They would never not use it. So, of course they are. Number two, other English-speaking countries, our Five Eyes partners, are smaller and therefore more vulnerable because the power asymmetry between them and China, the extreme example being New Zealand, is so great that they've been dealing with this issue longer and I think in a more intense way, and that the Chinese presence on those campuses have, if you just sort of read the news, of what's happened in those countries over the last, really decade, it's been much more intense than here. And so it's a good thing we're responding to it. They have not done a great job, honestly, of responding to it, but I think it's that power asymmetry. Number three, I will say, in my view, the vast majority of students from the PRC are minded to steer clear of politics, and I think that suits the CCP quite well. They are here in a very transactional way to get a degree. It's almost always engineering or STEM or something like that. It is not their tendency to want to get involved in political stuff in the way that, Western young people will sort of go out and do a protest just because why not? It's just not their thing, and they don't talk about politics. They don't talk about it. They don't want to study it, and they don't tend to. And so they're really just here to get things done. Some of them all of them, I would submit, are being repressed and overseen, and I think negatively influenced by the CCP. But only so many of them are involved, right? But when you're talking 300,000, if it's even 1%, it's a lot. So CCP goals, what do they want to do? They want to shape perceptions. They want us to think of them as a 5,000-year-old culture that has interesting cultural stuff, and none of the things that we probably should be talking about are included in that. Number two, they want to silence their own people on our campuses, but they want to silence all of us. Absolutely. They want to silence everyone in the world on the topics that they regard as forbidden. Classically, it's Tibet, Taiwan, Tiananmen Square, but the list is growing, right? Xinjiang, obviously, Inner Mongolia, the South China Sea, origins of COVID, all kinds of stuff. There's a list. That's most of the list that they don't want us talking about. They don't want to have lectures going on about it. They don't want us teaching classes about it. And they go about using their influence, money, and presence to try and prevent those things. They want to acquire technology. We know all about that. It's a big topic. I won't get into it. But I would add they want to build capabilities. And I would say that is different because it sort of explains, well, why is it so necessary to have so many people here studying in American universities? I think the number is there's less than 1,000 Americans currently studying in China. We don't need to go there, and we're not. But there's over 300,000 Chinese undergraduate and graduate students here. I would just say that there's kind of a hierarchy. What I put on this slide is sort of 1 through 4. It's one thing to know something. That's, I read the article. It's another thing to understand something. That's, I wrote the article. But above that, in the physical sciences, when you're talking about actually working with materials and stuff, it's another thing yet to be able to do the thing. And that takes practice and being in a lab and learning from other people who know how to do it. It's sort of this informal knowledge of I can do it. Doing something alone, that's number 3, is not nearly as hard as doing something as a team if it involves a group. And so you really got to be there, right? Just like if you want to be, I'll use a sports analogy. If you're an American kid with a lot of talent for soccer, if you want to be great, you got to go to Europe. It's a team sport. It's complex. You're not going to, well, maybe now you can do it here. You got to go to Europe, right? And so it's still true. If you want to be great at STEM And if it's a hands-on, get your hands dirty thing, you got to come to the United States. I mean, maybe some places in Europe, maybe Cambridge, mostly it's still the USA. So, CCP connections. I'm turning now to the last couple things I wanted to mention. So the State Department makes this release this week, and it doesn't say a lot, right? But it says we're going to be aggressive, we're going to be pulling visas, and it's for people with CCP connections and working on critical technologies. What might that mean? CCP connections. I hope it means that they're going to look real hard at anybody who's been involved in CSSAs, Chinese Students and Scholars Associations. Those are basically channels through which the Chinese state represses their own people on American campuses. There are many, 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 every major research university has one. Some smaller schools have them too. And it's the way for the CCP to make sure every student who comes in there knows that they're there and they know where their parents live. Pretty much that's what it's about. There's other things going on there, but that's why it matters to the CCP. Number two, military connections. We've had sort of visa criteria around that since the end of Trump 1, but maybe those will be intensified. Number three, children of CCP elites. That's pretty straightforward. Children of CCP members over there. That's an interesting one. There are perhaps 90 million-ish CCP members. So that could be most Chinese students. I don't know how we're going to find that out. I don't know if there's a way to find that out. I don't know if that's the direction we're headed. But that would be a pretty comprehensive position to take if we're pulling those visas. And then the other thing is people who are graduate researchers, I assume, who are working on critical technologies. What might that look like? I will just point out, obviously, anything with military applications, and I think that there's a lot of stuff with military applications, and it's not just the things that are obvious. And so there's a thing called the Chinese Defense Universities Tracker by the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. It's excellent. I've just put an acronym there, but you can look it up. Even if you just put those two acronyms, you'd get it. And it kind of outlines relationships between Chinese military universities and Western universities. And so that gives you a feel for some of those things. Below that, I just listed the 5 items that I think are probably top of the list for where we'd start. If we're talking about people working on critical technological research, it would be quantum AI, biotech, semiconductors, cybersecurity. There's probably more, but I'd start with those. So that's a little conjecture, and I've landed the plane in a little under 8 minutes, so I will thank you very much for the opportunity again, and I'll say goodbye. Thanks.
You did it indeed, Dan, and I've never seen that combination of the speaker and the slides. That's an innovation that maybe an important technology we don't want to share with the Chinese Communist Party. Thank you. I'm not sure that was exactly the advertised findings of the Select Committee, but it was very illuminating just the same, and we appreciate your contributions, Dan. We're going to hear next from a woman who has survived the Chinese educational system under the Maoists and their successors, as well as been a voice against Maoism, or cultural Marxism, if you will, inside American education. In fact, she came to prominence in this country, having immigrated from China legally, I hasten to add, when she addressed the school board in Loudon County, Virginia, about what is being done in these public schools of the county, as well as more broadly in the indoctrination of our children. Her name is Xi Van Fleet. She is what I call a foreign-born American patriot, a survivor of the Cultural Revolution in Mao's time, and the author of an immensely important book entitled Mao's America, A Survivor's Warning. And we've asked her to talk a bit about how the role of education in Mao's America is playing out, the Cultural Revolution in our schools. Xi, welcome back. It's so good to have you with us. Over to you, ma'am.
Well, thank you for inviting me to this very important panel and talk about this very important topic. I have to say, I am one of those Chinese students. I came here in 1986, And so I want to talk a little bit about who are those students, what the difference among them. They're not all just Chinese students. And also, first of all, I do want to say that education is really a matter of national security. For the CCP, that is exactly what they think of education. And they need to control the mind of young people, and they need to indoctrinate them. And if these young people come to America and learn about democratic values, that will be a threat to their power. At the same time, it is also a national security issue for the American, for us, because now under the control, the Marxist control of our higher education and public education or private education, now they produce American-hating younger generations, and that is absolutely a national threat, a security threat. So I think the speakers before me and really make that case very strongly. So it's both important to China and to us. Let me talk a little bit about the so-called Chinese students, and I think it's important for people to understand the makeup of this special population. And so after the opening up of China in the late 1970s, and I believe it was during the Carter, after Carter administration, when it tied the academic diplomatic ties with China, and Deng Xiaoping said, "Can I send some thousand students to study in America?" Carter said, "Send 300,000." And that's what the number we have today. We have about 300,000 students come here to study, or to steal, or to spy. Yeah, it's a really a question, but it started with the Carter administration. So in the early 70s, who came out first? And it was the children of the CCP elite. Whoever came here, sponsored by the government, and it's the chances they were the children of the CCP elite. And there's another group of people, and I fit into that category. And I came here with the help of an American friend. She came to teach in my college. We become friends. And then she helped me to get a citizenship in Western Kentucky University. So some people like me were able to secure the citizenship or scholarship from American University, because at that time, zero people can afford a tuition. And I could not even afford the airplane ticket. And I have to borrow money and eventually pay back. So there is a difference right there. I'm not saying that everyone came here sponsored by the government is a spy, but they are the selected. They are vetted by the CCP. Okay, so going forward, during the 90s, there are a lot of people were able to get a citizenship, scholarship, usually in the STEM field from the American government. And I know people who have no background. They're just very good. And they got here and because of the generosity of American universities. After China became rich, thanks to the bad mistake made by the Clinton administrations, they got really rich very fast after they were admitted to the WTO. Now we have a new elite. And so there's a lot of people made a lot of money, and they all send their kids to America. So this is a new breed of Chinese students. The students came earlier, like my generation. We all lived under Mao's regime. We had a firsthand experience of the horrors, living under the horrors of communism. And most of us even those who came here sent by the government, embraced freedom. And after the 1989 Tiananmen Square massacre, we were allowed to stay because the Congress passed the bill and just grant a green card to all of us. And most of us are very appreciative. And among the Chinese, we have a saying that the older generation of Chinese students mostly love America. But this new brand of Chinese students, they were taught to hate America. They were taught to believe that the East is rising and the West is declining. And it is the destiny of China to replace America. So a lot of them came here, and especially those government sponsored. They came here almost with the goal to help their so-called motherland, and which is really to help the CCP. So we have a lot of those people that they, well, some government sponsored, they are tasked to do certain things, including spying, and there are others they just want to. They want to, and there are still others. They are pressured because they have family in China, and so there's just all sorts of people. And one thing I think stands out is that the newer generation of Chinese students, they were taught to hate America, and when they came to America, their view were validated by their professors and by their universities. Yeah, they were taught that America is just such a racist country, is an evil place. And yeah, so they absolutely just join the crowd to hate America, to justify everything they do for their party, for their so-called motherland. And so that is the challenge we're facing. How do we know who's who? We don't. We absolutely do not know who is doing what, and who is real spy, who's not. Yes, it's true that most of the people that were now in universities, the Chinese students, are in STEM fields, but there are still a lot study social science, and so a lot of them turned out to be activists, like we see them in the BMM rioters, and there's the videos of young Chinese protesters speaking Mandarin. And so also in pro-Hamas demonstrations, and now they identify a girl or a young woman, and she was deported. That's very, very good. But they're not just studying just technology. They're actually involved, very much involved in the anti-America protests and demonstrations. And also, don't forget that Harvard had a nickname among the Chinese diaspora, that it is the CCP's largest party training school outside China. The Kennedy School, yeah, they trained more than like 4,000 high CCP officials. The highest level of the trainee or the graduate was the former vice president of China, and the one that was the head of negotiation team during the first Trump administration, Liu He. He was a graduate from Harvard. So it is not just some young students. They have sent the high officials, including the paramilitary personnel from Xinjiang. After that, it became a public knowledge that they were having genocide and persecution of Uyghurs. Harvard trained those people. So this is a really problem we are facing, because it's not just the CCP. Whenever I talk about CCP, I always point to the enemy from within. Those are the Marxists, communists in America. They share the same goal. Long march through institutions. They share the same goal. And some probably just want the money. They don't care about the ideology. They just want the money. And that's why it is so popular to have a Confucian Institute in college and university, because of the money. And now some of them were kind of gone, but they're not. They just changed name because the universities want their money. And that is really a problem. And so, and yesterday, here, I just want to share this tweet. Yesterday, in Harvard, they have graduation ceremony, and they choose for the first time in their history, they choose a female Chinese student to give this commencement speech. And I listened to her kind of long, whatever speech. Here's the interesting information about her. She graduated from the Kennedy School. What's her major? Her major is diversity in international relations. And what's her topic? The topic of her speech, basically, it is Xi Jinping's grand vision of a community with a shared future for mankind. It's Xi Jinping's version of the globalism. I call it Xi Jinping's globalism with the Chinese characteristics. And that is what's going on in Harvard. They choose her absolutely to send out a message to Trump administration and to the rest of America that they stand with Marxist communists and they stand with the CCP. And that is really our challenge. And I think it is easy to stop the CCP's infiltration if we can defeat the communists here, the enemies from within. So also, I just want to say that during Trump's first administration, he revived this policy of 1990 to stop letting in communists from Russia. 1990. And he revived it. And now we must understand we have to do the same. We should stop letting in any communists in our country. And we start with the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Xi. What an extraordinary presentation, especially this anecdote about the response of Harvard University to select as their valedictorian for the graduation yesterday, somebody who is espousing Xi Jinping thought in American campuses. It probably kind of says it all. Well, our final speaker, I'm very pleased to say, is a repeat contributor to these programs and a very considerably formidable one at that. His name is Dr. John Lanchowski. John is an individual who, like me, has the scars of working the anti-communist problem back in the day of the Soviet Union and Ronald Reagan's successful efforts ultimately to take down the evil empire. John was a senior advisor in the State Department for a time in the Reagan era and also was the director for European and Soviet affairs in the National Security Council at a critical time, 1981 to 1983, when the strategy for defeating the Soviet Union was promulgated and put into motion. John has gone on to other important public services, notably founding and serving as the president, now as the chancellor of a marvelous institution of higher learning in the United States, one of those that is pro-American, I hasten to add, and doing a marvelous job of training the next generation of practitioners of national security policy in what they need to know to be pro-American and to serve our country. He is the author of, among other books, Full Spectrum Diplomacy and Grand Strategy. And we've asked him to talk about what it must fall to him and hopefully many, many others like him to fight back inside the academy against these threats to freedom and the challenges that have to be overcome by pro-American academic institutions in so doing. John, again, welcome back, and thank you for finding time for this important conversation. With your background especially, it's just absolutely vital that we hear your thoughts.
I would just like to begin by thanking and congratulating every one of the panelists who came before me for your absolutely outstanding analysis and strategic, moral strategic witness, which is really the key to all of this. We are, as the great Soviet dissident Yuri Magayev has been writing, we are in the middle of a 100-year war that totalitarianism has been conducting against the West in general, and targeting the United States in particular. And we have been remarkably intellectually unprepared to understand this, and how this totalitarianism has had its communist dimension, its Nazi dimension, and its radical Islamist dimension, and how all of these things in one way or another are united in their different their different guises, their different variations. And there is so little study of what totalitarianism is, so little study particularly of communism, the universities are doing almost nothing to teach the truths about this history and about the nature of the ideology and its internal dynamics. The great weapon that we have in the war against totalitarianism is the truth, which is what has been manifested here in this webinar. And there's simply not enough of it. But Alexander Solzhenitsyn once said that one word of truth outweighs the world. And I remember, my father was a professor at Berkeley for 40 years in the political science department, and he was one of two anti-totalitarians on a faculty of 65 professors. And he didn't know who the other one was for 15 years. And eventually some of them came around to sobriety when it came to understanding totalitarian movements. But how can it be that all of these social science departments, and then of course education schools, can be so full of leftists, overt Marxists, covert Marxists, etc.? Well, it's because they seize the reins of power. They promote their own. They exclude anybody else who disagrees with them, and where most scholars don't want to be involved in academic administration. They don't particularly want to be chairman of the department. They want to teach and they want to write books. And so these universities have been vulnerable to the power struggle dynamics that have been introduced by people who are using the university for their political agendas. And it's extremely difficult, of course, to fight against this once you've got a 9-to-1 or 20-to-1 ratio against scholars who are either just for pure scholarship, or who actually believe in the cause of freedom. And so, but what's remarkable is that the 90%, the 95%, or the 99% of the professors on the left are scared to death of the one professor who bucks the trend. They cannot stand to have a single voice of truth. And it strikes me that most of these universities are not going to be repaired easily, precisely because of the problem of tenure, which has been abused by the ruling faculty members who are able to simply appoint their own proteges, promote those proteges, and exclude everybody else. I believe that there needs to be very serious efforts made, particularly in public universities, where that are responsive to popular government. Private universities, it's going to be harder, but in public universities, efforts can be made to, for example, to eliminate the tenure system, so that cannot be abused by the ruling, power-hungry professoriate with their leftist agenda. I've been associated with several academic institutions in the Washington, D.C. area, teaching or studying, and I came to the conclusion that it was necessary, in order to teach what had to be taught, in order to get our national security right, to found an independent academic institution with an independent board that is committed to our mission of the defense of American morally ordered liberty. And we have managed to get through the gauntlet of licensure and accreditation, when there are, and it is extremely difficult to get that in this country, because there is a cartel in the higher education system, and of course now the Institute of World Politics, IWP, our school, is now part of that cartel. But you can't even apply for accreditation until you have a degree program in place and a student body enrolled who are willing to graduate from an unaccredited school. It is a very long process to try to get that accreditation. We finally got it. Anyway, one of the most important things that has to be done here, in addition to the reform of our universities and the exclusion, and I have to say it is so important that we exclude the Chinese students. We didn't have thousands of students from the Soviet Union come here. We didn't let Soviet citizens who are generally speaking all approved by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union to travel. We didn't let them travel all over the United States. Those who were here were in an official capacity. They were restricted to traveling only 25 miles within a radius of 25 miles of the Soviet embassy or consulate, wherever they were stationed. We certainly didn't let them make 5,000 visits a year to our national laboratories, where a single visit. We let the Chinese quote unquote scientists make 5,000 visits a year to our national laboratories, where a visit constitutes a stay of 2 weeks to 2 years. And our naive scientists working in those laboratories, who know nothing about the huge war against totalitarianism that is ongoing, permit them to come in, and they share their scientific findings with them. It's absolutely incredible. One of our graduates, who's one of the most highly decorated intelligence officers defending the Defense Department equities in California, stationed in Silicon Valley, has testified that there's something like 25,000 Chinese intelligence collectors in Silicon Valley alone. And I will repeat again what has been said here by one of the panelists, namely that every single one of the Chinese students coming here has to report to the Chinese intelligence services according to the Chinese national security law. We simply should not be letting these people into the country, and I'm frankly amazed that the Trump administration seems to have awakened to this dreadful reality of this threat. And another thing that I should say is that some of the Chinese students who come here might potentially be beguiled by genuine American freedom, but they are so subject to their minders, whether they are stationed in the Zampolits, the political commissars who are tracking them, who probably are bugging their cell phones, that they cannot be free. I have suggested that we give every Chinese student coming in this country their own separate little cell phone, that it doesn't necessarily have a Chinese Communist Party bug in it. And although if it's made in China, it probably has the bug anyway. But when they can be separated from the commissars, some of them actually can be very helpful to us. But ultimately, this comes down to, I think one thing that can be done is that our government can begin to conduct ideological warfare against Chinese communism with its, Maoist, its Chinese characteristics, as they say. And one of the ways of doing this is to try to split the Chinese people from the CCP. And what we need to do is we need to convey to the Chinese people that they ultimately are our allies in a war against totalitarianism, that Marxism-Leninism with Chinese characteristics is a Western import that is totally incompatible with traditional Chinese thinking, culture, religion, etc., that it is an incredibly toxic import, and it actually constitutes the continuation of the century of humiliation, because now the Chinese people are being humiliated by the Chinese Communist Party, who are agents of a foreign ideology. We need to convey to the Chinese soldiers that they belong to a Communist Party army and not to a national army, that they are not vindicating the glory of traditional China, that they are fighting for a totalitarian force. These are ideas that can be inserted into Chinese consciousness, but somebody has to do it. We have to do it by broadcasting. We have to through the U.S. Agency for Global Media, however it gets reconstituted, Radio Free Asia, if it's reconstituted. But there will never be peace with the Chinese regime until the Chinese regime starts respecting, has peace with its own people. This is a lesson that Andrei Sakharov, the inventor of the Soviet H-bomb, was teaching. That there, peace with their own. He said the Kremlin will only have peace with its own people when they start respecting their people's human rights, and our human rights diplomacy, our human rights public diplomacy messaging has to be an integral part of this ideological war. We have to be discrediting Marxist ideas, which are very easy to discredit, but somebody has to study communism before they're intellectually capable of discrediting Marxist ideas. We have to support religion in China of all of its varieties, because it is such a considered by the regime to be such a threat to its internal security. Anyway, those are many things that need to be done, but they are all in the realm of bearing moral witness, moral strategic witness, telling the truth, and propagating that to the American public, to our own students, and to the people of China.
I could not have asked for a better sort of wrap up as well as prescription for what needs to be done about the larger problem, not just the immediate matter at hand of what's going on in our academic institutions. And if I failed to mention the Institute of World Politics by name, forgive me, it is an extraordinary, contribution to the fight, but testimony, John, to your leadership and clarity and conviction over all those years. And I've been, aware of and supporting you as you've gone through the travails of accreditation and fundraising and so on. And God bless you for having persevered and brought it to its present glorious state. We're going to,
Stan has a hard stop.
Who does?
Stan has a hard stop coming right up.
Well, I think we probably do too. Alas, we are at the end of our extended time, let alone the appointed hour of 2:15. I would, if anybody wants to take just a quick question or two, be happy to toss one your way. If you've got to go, we will thank you very much for participating, especially Dr. Ridgely. God bless you. Keep up the great work, and we'll be talking with you further soon. Anybody else game for a question quickly? I don't want to wear out our audience either, but hearing none. Let me just then wrap up. I want to say this has been a prodigiously important conversation. Each and every one of these presenters has made points that I pray will be brought to the attention of the administration, which, as John said, amazingly, has taken on this fight, notably with Harvard, yes, of course, but now with academic institutions across the country in connection with these foreign students. It is likely to be a thankless task. It will surely be further impeded by federal judges who think they know better what the government of the United States should do, often without regard, frankly, to the Constitution, let alone the national security. I pray that President Trump and his team will carry on in removing Chinese students from this country, obviously in an orderly and peaceable way. But this is an absolutely indispensable step to reducing the powerful threat that they represent in this country. And I think, as she has said in her wonderful personal testimonial, this is not to say that every single individual person from China, student or otherwise for that matter, is necessarily an enemy. On the other hand, every single individual from China, whether they're students or otherwise, are, as we've heard repeatedly, under the thumb of the Chinese Communist Party and obliged to engage in whatever they're directed to do by the military of the CCP, the People's Liberation Army. And I just would leave you with this final thought. As we contemplate that prospect, we have to bear in mind, as we try to underscore in every single one of these programs, we are not at odds with the Chinese people. I think it's fair to say that we are not interested in war with the Chinese government, but they are interested in war with us. Indeed, they are waging war against us. And they have found, as I think Dan Cullen put it, the obvious play of using our universities as just one more front in that overt, determined, patient effort to take down this country. We must be equally clear-eyed about it. And I want to thank each and every one of these remarkable speakers for helping put these critically important ideas so starkly. We must make the right choices. So thanks to Karen Siegemund, to Trevor Loudon, to Stan Ridgely, to Dan Cullen, to G. Van Fleet, and to John Lenchowski. Heroes all, and we need their teaching to be closely followed by all of you, and with your help, a vastly larger audience beyond. God bless you. Thank you for joining us. Come back to us again next week. Stay online with us at presentdangerchina.org. Back to you, Dee Dee. Thank you.
Thanks, Frank. As Frank just said, a video of this webinar will be posted to presentdangerchina.org within a day or so of the conclusion of our program. Please share this and our other programs with your elected representatives, colleagues, and other networks. For webinar notices, updates, and news, subscribe to our Substack at presentdangerchina.substack.com and follow us on X at CPDChina. Join us again next week for another installment of our Committee on the Present Danger China webinar series on the CCP's unrestricted warfare against America and the free world, and how CCP captured elites betray the USA. Thanks for being here, and goodbye.